everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about a topic that's been kind of floating around in my head for a while now, and that is the topic of being able to critique the things you love, specifically when it comes to books. So I spend way more time on Twitter than I probably should, but I like to be on Twitter during the workday to get my mind off of work on especially busy days. It's kind of what helps keep me calm, even to have like a distraction, because with the pandemic and working from home, like a lot more people are on edge. So when I'm working with, I used to work with the public, and that was especially hard. Now I'm working with people within my company who are supporting the public, and sometimes, they just get a little bit angry and frustrations get a little high. So it's always good to have something that takes my focus off that and kind of keeps me in a good mood. But sometimes I'll come on Twitter and I will see some of the stupidest out of touch conversations that I've ever seen. And it's from communities who believe that they are so progressive. So that's the scary part. I actually had spoken on it before about how I had to stop following the romance book topic on Twitter because I would just see stuff coming through it every day that aggravates me now. Now Twitter did something to their algorithm where I'm not even following that topic, but because I like people who talk about romance, a lot of those topics still come on my timeline. And then they were doing this thing that it shows you tweets similar to tweets you liked. So if you liked something about a topic, you're going to start getting tweets from it, even if what you liked was the opposite of what these tweets are saying, just because they happen to be on the same topic. So yesterday I watched the craziest conversation erupt in Romancelandia, and it was over a tweet by Jack Edwards. I've watched Jack Edwards' channel before. I don't watch him all the time, but I don't find anything wrong with it. He kind of just reads all books, and he likes to make little jokes here and there. So he's been reading romance, and he did a tweet, and again, this is a popular joking format on Twitter. No one, blank. Romance books. This man is so big. He is just so huge. He towers over me. All I can think about is how big he is. His arms are big. But I have to contain this feeling. We work together. Yet my mind is imagining a life with Mr. Big in all his enormousness. He is so big. And I saw that and I thought it was funny. And he also tweeted something I don't have saved about ocean eyes. And that's something that I call out all the time in romance. And I don't even read all those mainstream white romances, because you read those and then after a while you just get tired of constantly hit with those descriptions of blonde hair and blue eyes, and we don't realize how much reading that over and over again affects people's psyche and how that makes you believe that is what you have to look for in the ideal man. So I personally just don't like reading a lot of those stories. I've had my fill of white romance, so I don't really read it. And somebody actually reminded me during yesterday's controversy of some of the weird stuff that they used to put in mainstream romance. There was a time period where and I believe this was in the early 2000s too, there was a lot of hot mess stuff in romance in the early 2000s that I can look back on and be like, ew. But this, there was a point where every book felt like they had to tell us the color of a woman's pubes. If she was a blonde or a redhead, that's the way you knew she was a natural blonde or a redhead. It was fucking weird. And looking back on it, I'm like, Why did they feel the need to do that? But I find that people get really, really, really emotional when you talk about anything possibly critiquing romance. And it's like, come on guys, it's a book. They are built to enjoy, but also rip apart and talk about what you like and disliked. Like, how can y'all be in a community where you're here because you love to analyze books and go into deeper discussion with books than your average person, yet you don't want to talk about what's actually in these books? Everything in romance is not flowers and roses. There's a lot of stuff that we like that are harmful, and we should be able to enjoy them while also admitting that, yeah, in real life, that fucking sucks, and I would never support that, like workplace romance. And there are times when I like a good workplace romance, but in the real workplace, that's sexual harassment, and it never works in the woman's favor, like ever. And it usually turns out very bad for her and great for the men. And then also, what happens with those workplace romances is it starts to affect the other woman in the workplace negatively. I've witnessed that many times, like over a couple of jobs. So it's so funny, like, but I would still read a book like that sometimes and be like, oh, that's so cute, even though it's not cute in real life. So I find that people too now think that reading and writing and liking romance is some type of marginalization. And I think some of that is just the effect of being inside so much during the pandemic. And I really need people to step away from the internet sometimes. Maybe pick up another hobby besides reading books, like painting or drawing or knitting or crocheting. Something that'll bring you back down to reality. Even going on other places and not just fan group places, like you can go on Reddit to the general like book discussions, and it's versus the romance subreddit, and you can talk to other readers and get different opinions. Like, we are in a bubble where we're constantly used to hearing people talk about our favorite books over and over again, to the point where people, if you talk about their favorite book, they freak out and like just irrationally, and it's very unhealthy. I like talking to people outside of book social media sometimes about books, because they're going to have differing opinions, and some of the stuff that people care about in book social media outside of it, they do, your more casual, less involved reader does not. Like, we're in this community online patting ourselves on the back most of the time for the bare minimum when it comes to diversity, and a lot of times people will casually mention it, but they don't want to have a full, open, and honest discussion. Like, I know people get sick of me, but I will never stop having the discussion about how Trad Romance is currently patting themselves on the back for being so diverse in romance, and then most of their diverse romance has white men as the love interest, and they're smack dab on the cover. Like, you try looking for mainstream romance with black women, the majority of books people will throw at you have a white man in them. And it's usually a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes, because again, that archetype, that's what Romancelandia loves, that blonde hair, blue-eyed hero who's very tall and muscular. And that's just not a lot of people's reality. You don't understand how it constantly is to be hit with that image of the ideal man, an ideal hero all the time. Like, it's a little bit crazy. And some of y'all like lean heavily into it, like and like I kind of squirm reading some of y'all posts, because you'll be like, interracial romance is my brand, and I see it in the marketing now too for some of these books, because when I'm on Edelweiss, I like to read the key marketing selling points for some of these stories, and it's not the plot that is a key selling point anymore. Sometimes it's just like interracial romance. And then it says interracial romance is really hot right now, and this book capitalizes on that. And I'm like, okay, but what about the character types? Like, what type of career does she have in addition to what goals does she have? What is the man's personality? Like, he has to be something different than other than just white. And then it's not even just black romance. So you go looking for Latinx romance, and so there's very little that you're gonna find mainstream. And then when you go into it, you're gonna find a lot of white men there too, and it's white men outside of the culture, because you have to remember Latinx is not a race. Those people, you can be Latinx and be of multiple races, but you're gonna find often a white man who is outside of the culture. And some books do that really weird thing where like the white people outside of the culture are so in touch with the culture, like they eat the food from the culture, and some of them speak Spanish, and I'm like, why couldn't you just write in an actual Latinx love interest? I don't understand. Like, that's really awkward to me, and I live in a Latinx community, and most of like them are with each other as well, so that's kind of awkward too, like not seeing that represented. And Romancelandia just really, as they spend time screaming into the void about the stupidest stuff over and over and over again, arguing the same argument all the time, but they don't want to talk about how BIPOC men are barely represented. Like, look at those illustrated covers y'all love so much, and even the ones that aren't illustrated, look at the covers. It's harder to find these non-white love interests. I want to see more non-white Latinx love interests. I want to see more Asian love interests. I want to see more black love interests. I want to see more Pacific Islander love interests. There's just no reason why the ideal man has to always be big and enormous and have ocean eyes and blonde hair. And even the big and enormous thing, I'm a tall girl, so yes, I do look for taller guys because I tower over a lot of people. But most of the guys that I meet are my same height or shorter. And a lot of y'all are out here dating those men who are my same height or shorter. So it's so funny to me that you never want them represented, and they deserve love too. Like, you're painting the picture that only men who are 6 foot and up matter, and only men who are 6 foot up are attractive, when a lot of y'all have shorter husbands and shorter boyfriends. Why aren't y'all showing them love on the pages? And this idea that you have to protect romance from these people outside who don't regularly read it is insane. Like, how else is romance going to get more readers if y'all always want to gatekeep who gets involved? We shouldn't have to read the entire history of romance before becoming a romance reader. Like, I don't give a damn what happened in romance in the 1990s and the 1980s. That doesn't affect what that overall really doesn't affect what I'm reading now, because romance is constantly changing. Like I said, I said in a previous video, the stuff that was popular in the early 2000s is not as popular in romance now. Like, we've evolved a little bit, so some of those more pushy and aggressive heroes who are like, this is how it needs to be, and who think they know you better than yourself. I mean, there are some still there in some darker romances, but they're not so much mainstream anymore because women are like, ew, that's gross. And that's not the kind of man that I like. Like a lot of y'all like cinnamon roll, sweet men. I know I do. And I don't want to read I don't want to have to read the historical greats when if I'm interested in historical romance, because they weren't writing for me. Like, that's one of the strangest arguments that I've come across a couple of times, where they feel like in order for non-white women to write historical romance, we need to study the OGs of historical romance, who are white women who are writing about other white women. And it's like, one, our historical romance do not have to be set in Europe during the Victorian era. That wasn't our reality. Most of us do not have ancestors who were living in that era, who were living in that area during that era, and we should be able to set it in any historical time period. I know it's a lot for some people to understand, but the 70s are historical. The 80s are historical. The 90s are historical. The early 2000s are now historical, whether you want to admit it or not. And we should be able to set stories there without pushback. And everything doesn't have to be about fancy gowns. And even if we are donning a fancy gown, why can't we don a fancy gown from our culture? Why does it have to be a European ball gown? And why do we have to idolize these dukes and earls who got their money off the backs of slavery, especially when the time periods these were set in? Slavery either ended not too long ago, or it's still going on in other parts of the world. And that's another thing people don't want to talk about, because they just want to live in their fantasy land. And that's great for you to be in your fantasy land, but there's some of us, we just simply cannot separate that time period and just like try to squeeze ourselves into it, because we're always thinking about, well, what was happening with the other black people in that space. Like most of us were not in high society, and the ones that were had more proximity to whiteness because they had a lot of white ancestry. So that's one reason why I avoid historical romance, because I don't care about the archetypes that they're constantly pushing. And I believe that we should have freedom to explore a variety of histories. I wish Romancelandia would really focus on all the other things that need to be changed within the romance genre, with the same passion that they focus on these insular conversations, with the same passion that they focus on attacking men while also being transphobic. And it's definitely not just Romancelandia. Like, Yland on Twitter is a mess too, and there are a lot of people who will use the defense of the books being for children to try and silence adults from talking about the problems within that genre, while simultaneously also marketing their books and pushing their books towards adult readers. And that's a whole mess up as well. And it just goes back to being able to call out the things that you enjoy. And I'm going to continue calling out the things that I enjoy. I'm going to continue having great discussions. Like, the only way we're going to make change is if we can actually step back and be like, I like this, but this is where it needs to change, or we need to see more of these stories, and we need to see more of these types of characters, and we need to not hold on to this idea that we have to have that standard 3-act structure where this happens and this happens and this happens. That sometimes you can deviate, and you don't always have to have the 3rd act breakup, which was something that was very, very controversial before, but now I see people are starting to be a little bit more open to, and readers are saying we don't always want to see that. So If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. Leave a comment down below and let me what your thoughts are. Do you normally critique your favorite genres, especially for you romance readers? Is that something that you think about when you're reading? Like, do you spot problems and are you willing to call them out, or is it just, well, it's a love story, it's a romance, I love it, and you just let it go? And thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I will check in with you soon. Bye!